Hello, all. Welcome to the Human Libraries of Procurement podcast. We call it Human Libraries of Procurement because of three basic elements: the human connect, the libraries part, which shows knowledge and wisdom, and procurement because we talk about procurement. One such human library of procurement is Pratik Patel. So, Pratik, thank you for doing this. How are you doing today?
I'm doing I'm doing great. I really appreciate you bringing me onto this forum. I hope we can share some nuggets that will inspire others and really elevating our profession and what we can be as a strategic enabler in our organizations.
Sure. So, Pratik, we'll start with your career journey and what did you do? How did you land in procurement supply chain?
Sounds great. So I have a background in engineering. I have so I'm an industrial engineering bachelor's and then an MBA from a business perspective. I started in as an actually I started as a consultant at Anderson Consulting, where I was a process analyst, given my degree from a process perspective. I started there, and then I had co-opted or interned at a number of different companies because where I went to school was a 5-year program for engineering. So you had a year and a half of experience before you even started your career after college. And that was very important because it allowed me to build relationships. It allowed me, I think when I was 20 years old, I had formal project management training. So one of my co-ops was at GE, so I had formal Six Sigma, both training and a project. I think I was probably the first one at GE overall to have a project where I basically said, give me all the co-ops and we'll solve this. We know the methodology, just give us the problem and we'll solve it just with co-ops. And we did.
Right.
And we solved a $300,000 problem, or the $300,000 problem that they had with door dents in our facility and where they were happening. So those experiences help to give you a level of confidence and tools that help you then in terms of how you think about problems that you face. Because in school, it's about problem solving. And at work, all the tools that we learn also help us in aiding on problem solving. So I started then after Anderson, Accenture. I went back to one of my companies that I had co-opted, Energizer, which is a Eveready battery company. And I was an engineer in the plant. And I knew the general manager, and I told him that, hey, in 10 years, I expect to be where you are. I need to earn it. I need to accelerate my learning curve. I need to show that I am continuously progressing at a much faster rate. So I need to self-assess myself on a continuous basis to be able to get there. But I just want you to know that's my aspiration. And he loved it. And he embraced that. And he then made our procurement organization aware because they were struggling to find talent to consider me as an engineer in the plant. I was 25 years old. And that was my first journey into procurement, is through that, actually, that initiative of where I just wanted to kind of really push myself. And he saw that, and he saw the skills in me. And I was in a town of like 15,000 people. And where I was going to move to with procurement was in our R&D headquarters, which is Cleveland, Ohio, which is almost 2.5 million people. And so I was like, okay, bigger city. I'm 25. I'm closer to my parents. Yes, I'll do that. So that's how I started in procurement. Is really where my general manager gave me this opportunity to reach out to the leadership in procurement, and I have not had any desire to leave since. So since then, I've done all areas of direct, indirect procurement. So indirect. Well, first direct, so finished goods, batteries, packaging, raw materials, all of that. Then on the indirect side, I've had the opportunity to really manage real estate, travel, fleet operations for Energizer, which was At the time, about 12 million square feet of space, 140 locations across the world. Travel was pretty significant, 5,000 employees across the world. So all of these areas, and I had a third-party company that we were outsourcing for like the RFPs and things like that. So I was, in a sense, the business owner as well as the procurement professional. And then I had a chance to do MRO, 50,000 parts in an operation. This was in a pharmaceutical company, as well as all areas of indirect for them. And then I had the chance here to come to MasterCard. And here, I basically told them that when they were looking at me, give me your hardest area. There were 9 areas that were open at the time, a 75% change. And they decided to give me labor, and specifically tech services, IT services. And I understand now why, because I see the challenges a lot of companies have had over the years. But I think we've done a pretty good job in terms of how we manage it, and it's from a lean perspective. So I've had many value stream mapping that I've done in my career as well, which is really mapping out the process, understanding the current state, where the waste exists, the things that are non-value added that our customers are not willing to pay for. And then from that, we locked people up in a room for 5 days. We did the full value stream mapping exercise, mapped out exactly where our current state is, where our problems were. And, we looked at labor and how long it was taking us to execute labor, and then all the steps that were involved and trying to eliminate that. So we identified 61 pain points in that process. So, I share these just because when you face a challenge, let's say you're in a new area in procurement and you face a challenge, I always say, understand from your customers what their pain points are. And the best way to do that is to get alignment to do some type of a Kaizen event, a continuous improvement event where you can map out the process. But first, you start with just understanding round robin with everybody. What are the pain points that you're facing? Let's eliminate waste. It is very easy to get buy-in from people when you have them tell you what their problems are and you try to fix the problem. That's just a practical, common sense approach.
Right. No, well done. A lot of experience there. I picked up certain words there. So a lot of problem solving there. A lot of lean words are there. Waste was there. Pain points, waste, value stream mapping. So a lot of lean concepts are there, and we will discuss about lean concepts in more details as we go up. You've been in different categories and different roles. You said travel, you said IT services. I started off with IT services as well. Is there any category that you like more than anything else?
I like any category that has a lot of challenges, right? And I got to tell you, my first category that I ever supported, which was finished goods, really helped me to understand what does it take to run a small business in a sense. Because in finished goods, it was nickel metal hydride batteries. And so when I'm engaging with the suppliers, it's also around what's the roadmap? What innovations are they bringing? We were even helping in that design process. We were working hand in hand with marketing. I had a chance to be a part of focus groups where we're learning from our customers on what is important for them. I had a chance with that group to also lead how do we go to market in terms of a low-cost flashlight, for example. So I had the chance to go to like Mexico or the Philippines or different places and really understand that market and make market visits. So from a holistic standpoint, that really helped me to gain a deep understanding of the whole value chain that is involved. And even things like freight forwarder, Incoterms, right? And getting deep into that, because sometimes we had delivery issues. Sometimes we had raw material issues like the cost of nickel and hedging on nickel and things like that. So holistically, kind of thinking through everything required to bring the product to market. And I learned so much from that, and I take things away from that experience in all my future opportunities that I had.
Right. Yes. I'll just read out one comment here. Alex says he's driving to Nottingham to meet his new grandson, Atlas. I think we talked to Alex, I think last week. At that time, his grandson was, I think, 4 days old. So I think he's around 15 days old. So congratulations, Alex.
Congratulations, absolutely.
Right. Just a disclaimer part, because we worked in so many companies, and Pratik would be sharing a lot of those experiences. But we are not representing any company here. Even if some names come out, it is just because we worked there for a long time and all that. And the other thing is that if anyone has any question, please put them on chat. We will be really happy to answer those questions. So we go into lean now. We start with lean concepts. Let's say, how can lean concepts help procurement?
Absolutely. So before we talk about that, let's understand the definition of lean, just to make sure everyone knows what lean is. So lean is all about flow. So you want to have flow in any process that you have. If you don't have flow, then what you have is waste. And if you have waste, that is non-value added. Your customer is not willing to pay for it. So you want to focus on value-added activities that drive flow in any type of handoff that you have. There are 8 areas of waste that exist in any process. So we'll talk more about that with the specific example around RFPs shortly. But when you think about it in procurement, what do we have? We're buying goods and services. Waste exists both in terms of a seller resonating with a buyer and being able to truly help the buyer understand the value proposition. Sometimes there's a lot of back and forth to make that happen. Right. Waste exists in the processes that we have to be able to do 3 things in my mind to support our organizations for what procurement stands for. We are financial stewards. So we need to ensure we're getting the best value for what we're spending. We are gatekeepers of risk. And I would say we're the first and last line of defense. The first line being the contracts, the governing documents. So waste exists in the red lines that exist back and forth to try to execute. So how can you streamline that process? How can you ensure that you're mitigating your risk, but the supplier also understands the risk that they need to accept? So waste exists even in terms of the management of suppliers, the number of suppliers that you have. The more suppliers that you have, the more you need to rinse and repeat your process with all of those suppliers. So all of those things exist in procurement. And I think there is tremendous opportunity for us to leverage lean concepts within procurement.
Right. Yeah, those are pretty nice examples. Red lines are a big problem. Whenever there is a red line, and the to and fro that goes on. The way, we see it as negotiation, but it is what it is. In terms of lean, it is a wastage of time, and it stops the flow. Basically, what you said. So we are going into the 8 areas of waste for RFP execution.
Yeah, so before we go there, let's talk about the 8 areas of waste that just exist in general in any process. And it's by the acronym of downtime. And if you think about it, anything that we do, it doesn't matter what it is, there is always the potential for a defect to take place. A defect is anything that you have to touch again. If you have to touch it again when you don't anticipate that you need to touch it again as part of the process, that's a defect. And I'm sure there are many examples that people have where they have a process that they need to execute and they need to touch it again because there was some type of a problem that existed why you need to fix it. So that's one, is defect. Overproduction. So producing more than what is required. I'm sure that exists too. Waiting for others to get things done before you can move forward. Not utilizing all of the resources that are available to us. Or having to do additional movement of that process because that process needs other people to kind of sign off on it. You know, is that really needed? That's considered transportation. Or you think about, you know, from an inventory perspective, and I'm talking about all of these things from a service element, because the acronym is downtime, and downtime you would think is more related to production, but I think it can be translated to services as well. And so lean principles apply not only to production and manufacturing, but also in services. So think about from an inventory perspective that you have too much work that you need to get done, and you haven't balanced the workload appropriately among people. You have a lot of multitasking that you need to do because you have too much of a workload. Or from a motion perspective, you know, work without producing a value added activity. So what that means is that you are doing these extra steps. Maybe you have reporting. Maybe you're asking for more information than you really are going to be utilizing, and you're going through the motions because this is how things have been done in the past. That's waste, especially if it's not being utilized to make decisions. Or the last one in the downtime acronym, the E, in extra processing. So you have to think about standard work. You have to think about the work that needs to get done and to have consistency, templatizing what needs to get done so that you don't have additional steps that need to take place that are not standardized, that you do it once and then you do it again, and it's not exactly the same. So you need to ensure that you have a streamlined approach to doing things. So that is the 8 areas of waste. And then,
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So if you would please continue with the 8 waste areas that are applicable to RFP.
yeah, so first off, right, when we think about an RFP, it is just one of the ways that we look at a competitive assessment. We're going to the marketplace and we're asking them for a proposal to be able to assess what their value proposition is versus alternatives. But I hope everyone understands an RFP is not an end-all be-all, and it's just one of the ways. It's just one of the many levers that we have available to us. So when you think about it from the 8 areas of waste and lean, from a defect perspective, we sometimes spend too much time in an RFP defining the requirements of like the specifications of what we require, when we really need to be thinking about what's the problem we're trying to solve. Ultimately, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And if you make that visible to the supplier, then now that enables that supplier to have a degree of innovation and thought leadership that they can bring on how they think of how that they could bring about solving that problem. And if you are sharing specific requirements, there's a chance you miss something in the process too. And that's waste if you have to go back and like, oh, we forgot to add this, or we need to also think about these things. So when you think about the problem to solve, then I think there's an inherent, especially if you pick the right suppliers to be a part of the RFP, they're going to understand what are the inherent requirements required to be able to solve that problem. So even if you miss some things, you still are okay because you've shared with them what's the problem you're trying to solve. Does that make sense in terms of a
Right.
defect?
Yeah, it is all about that problem solving again. I mean, if the supplier gets to the root problem solving that you're trying to do, I think that solves a lot of problems in itself.
Absolutely. So if we can move on for overproduction.
Mhm.
So I found out over the years, and I've made all these mistakes, by the way. So everything I'm sharing here, I've made these mistakes. I've learned from them. I've kind of thought about, okay, this is waste. How do I go about eliminating that waste? Try to get to the root cause and use many different approaches to try to identify that root cause, including the 5 whys, if you're familiar with that. You keep
Right.
asking why until you get to the root cause. Fishbone diagrams. There's many different, I guess, problem-solving techniques that exist out there. But this one around overproduction. So I don't know about you, written questions, when you get that on RFPs, when you enable the supplier to ask the questions for clarification that they may have, that can get pretty overwhelming. Sometimes it can be 100+ questions. And then that
Right.
makes you think about maybe I shouldn't have so many people in the RFP too. And
Mhm.
um, we need to ensure that we're clearly communicating our requirements the best that we can, but at the same time, there's going to be questions. So what's the best way to go about so that everybody gets consistently the same responses and minimize the written questions? And I believe it's a vendor blind call. And so that concept is simply, you have sent the RFP out and you give the suppliers an opportunity to review the RFP. And maybe a few days later to a week later, you set up a call with the suppliers where you have the business on the call and the business will articulate what's the problem they're trying to solve, what's their objective that they're having, and as a part of that objective, they'll maybe share some expectations of what they're expecting in the RFP responses. And then give all the suppliers an opportunity, not knowing who any of the suppliers are on the call. No one else will know who anyone else is. It's just a phone number that you're giving. Um,
Mhm.
then they have the opportunity to ask the questions. And it's amazing how one supplier will build on another supplier too, and we get to a much more enriched conversation that helps to ensure everybody's on the same page. And that helps to eliminate waste, because I can't remember any time I've done this, and I've done this over 100 times in my career now. I can't remember any time where I've had more than 20 questions come back, because that really helps to provide the clarity for the suppliers. And now with AI, we always have Copilot on, and
Mhm.
we will put a transcript into place so that we will send them the transcript and then share with them, go ahead and use your AI that you have using the transcript to glean any insights you need from what was discussed, because we don't want them busy writing down responses to the questions that people have, but listening and then going back later and being able to assess. And that just helps to ensure we have a much better response on the RFP.
I think I totally agree with that 100 odd questions that we do in RFP. Our fear of missing out some question is too big, uh, and we end up having too many questions there. I also kind of agree to what you said, the blind call. It is more helpful than the classical thing that we do. We get all the questions from all the vendors, and then we collate all the questions, and then we answer them, and then we send all the answers to all the vendors. So that's one way that we were told to do RFPs. But I think this is much quicker. The wait time is not that much. So I think this is a good best practice sharing. We
Okay.
finished the first two. If you would please
Yes,
carry on.
absolutely. So from a waiting perspective, like I mentioned, it's about where you're waiting for others to finish their task. So in an RFP, it's sometimes it's getting all the people that need to provide their input, getting them all together to make decisions. And so one of the things that I do is I schedule all of the key activities right up front. So we align up front on the timeline of when we want to be able to finish having the requirements done, when we want to have the scorecard template completed, when we send the RFP out, when we get the responses back, when are we going to evaluate those and score those? When would the next round of selection take place? So all of those key activities, we schedule right away and we get on people's calendar, because part of the challenge sometimes in being able to move quickly is having all of the key decision makers in the room at the same time. And so when we align on that up front, then we're scheduling meetings that are weeks, sometimes maybe even months out, and everybody is aligned, and it's so much more efficient than when everybody understands the timeline, aligns to it, supports it, and is willing to make the time to be able to support the activity. Because time is money too. And we need to make sure that we get out the RFP on a timely manner, because the reason we're doing it is to save money, to do a competitive assessment. So I think that's how you can minimize waiting in the RFP and the waste that exists there, by scheduling everything up front and ensuring that you try to also, by having all the right people in the room, minimize the ambiguity that can exist in the RFP too, in how you define the problem you're trying to solve and the requirements to support it. Because the thing is, if you don't do that well, you have garbage in, garbage out. And I tell the business this too, you can be very high level on the RFP, but the responses are also going to be high level then. And is that going to still achieve your objective?
Right. I think waiting takes the most time for an RFP. Either you're waiting for the vendor to come back, or you're waiting for the scorecard to be filled out.
Yeah, so this is the frustration piece, where you go through the check boxes of what's required to go and execute, but in the process, maybe you haven't fully used all the resources that are available to you, the skills, the abilities, the knowledge that can help. And I know problems I've had in the past is, and I like to use this a tool called Purchasing ChessBoard. If you go to purchasingchessboard.com,
Right.
it's by A.T. Kearney. I don't know if others are exposed to it, but I personally have been brainwashed by it since 2011, and I use it all the time. And it talks about where buyer influence and seller influence exist in a simple XY axis. And then there are 64 levers that exist in terms of where that influence is greater and what levers can be pulled. And RFP, RFI is only one of those 64. But I think all of us, more often than not, use RFP, RFI as our way of doing that competitive assessment, and not thinking through all the levers available for us to be able to drive the value that the business is seeking. A simple one to incorporate in the RFP is what's called expressive bidding. Expressive bidding, right, talks about where you're giving the supplier an opportunity to maybe think about solving the problem in a different way than how you're sharing the requirement. Or it's also about, hey, if we had this much more volume than what our requirement is, how much more of a discount could we get? So it's giving that opportunity to have more of a tiered approach too. So I think that that's an example that people can utilize right away, that if you are not doing, would absolutely help provide more thought leadership and maybe a different approach to still solving the same problem you're trying to have.
Right. Okay.
And I think what I shared as well. So that's not necessarily what I shared in the solution there, but I want to just
Mhm.
briefly talk about that too. Um, Part of non-utilized people is also the supplier resources that are supporting this RFP, not just internally. So let's make sure that to help both parties out, that the suppliers understand if they can't meet a must is mandatory, realistic, and measurable. And if you can't meet that, then don't even submit a proposal. So you really need to challenge the business on what the musts are that are required in the RFP and ensure that the suppliers can provide it. It gives you the most leverage because most suppliers don't want to walk away from the opportunity, but then at the same time, by submitting a proposal, they're agreeing to the must.
Right. And this is pretty interesting as well. When you talk about the bid management team from the supplier side, if you actually sit down and talk to them, they have a different perspective of procurement as well. So that's pretty interesting conversation.
Yeah, so transportation. So think about this in terms of approvals. Are there multiple people that need to sign off before you can send the RFP out? And what I say to that is empower your people. Like the people that are involved in generating those requirements, helping to articulate the problem they're trying to solve are probably the people that are involved on the day-to-day in working with whoever the supplier is that's going to be chosen to provide that good or service. So as much as possible, you have to challenge, why does it require this additional layers of approval to send an RFP out? And so I always challenge, like, do we have the right people in here that can help us in making this decision? And if they say no, then I'm also going to say, okay, who else needs to be involved in kind of building these requirements out? And in many cases, they're going to say, well, I'm the one that's going to be doing that, but I still need my manager's approval. And so then I challenge. And then most managers and leadership understand, and they're all about empowering their people. And so they're okay with that. So it's important that we enable that to take place. And the other thing is, don't be too rigid in the questions that you ask, because it doesn't allow for innovation to take place. There's a balance between how detailed you can be and how high level you can be. And if you're too rigid, then you're going to get a specific type of response. Inventory exists when you have more work that needs to get done because you don't have the full clarity and expectations set. You should always have an RFP process terms and conditions. So this is just the process. So when you're sending the RFP, you should have a document that outlines, this is how we handle RFPs. Your one point of contact is the procurement contact. Do not contact the business. And any clarification you have, you work with us. Honor the timeline. If you don't meet the timeline, your proposal will not be accepted. We have about 5 or 6 pages of our process from that terms and conditions standpoint. Confidentiality can be a component of that, even though you probably already have an NDA in place or in your contracts. But those are things that can help to ensure alignment around expectations on the process. And when you do that, you minimize any additional questions that will come up just in understanding the process and focus on more the problem you're trying to solve on why you have the RFP for this engagement.
Right. I'll just add one more point here in terms of the red lines that we started off with for contracts. If you have the terms and conditions right for RFP, I think those red lines can be also minimized, if not totally, reduced. But you can at least minimize those red lines and supplier not agreeing to your terms later on.
Yeah, motion. So I've seen this too, and I've done it early on in my career, but I try not to do it now. I'm sure everybody has a template in your organization for an RFP that you utilize, and maybe there are standard questions that you ask all suppliers. And I've seen where we just continually ask the same questions over and over again. So if you're going to use those standard questions every time, and you're not going to be really reviewing it because that's not a part of your decision making, then why are you asking the questions? Going through the motions is not an acceptable answer for why you ask the questions. You should be asking the questions because they're material to the decision you need to make. So asking too many questions that do not materially impact the outcome, that's waste. So questions should be about addressing your must or high wants that you have established. Questions should be directly correlated to the scorecarding of how you're evaluating that supplier. And in general, I would tell you less is more for many reasons.
The last one is left, excess processing.
Yep. Yeah. Extra processing, right? So that is really about suppliers providing canned responses. That is absolutely extra processing, and that creates waste because you can't truly understand the differentiated value of what that supplier is bringing when they're just giving you marketing material and not really addressing the problem you're trying to solve. They're just giving you high-level things that they've used with other people and just putting those slides in. So dictating in an RFP of slide 1 needs to be this, slide 2 needs to be this, slide 3 needs to be this. This is what we want to see. That helps you also with mapping it back to the scorecard, which can be a huge time saver. Instead of having to go and figure out where in the slides or in their proposal that maps back to how you're scoring. I found that to be very helpful.
Interesting point that I took from that discussion. I think there were many. One thing that I wanted to discuss after the slides were over was the expressive bidding that you were talking about. Could you please explain that one more time for everyone to understand? Because that's very interesting.
Yeah. Expressive bidding is going beyond just the pure requirements, and you're giving the supplier the ability to give you what flexibility they have based on more or less volume. So that will help you understand better how their cost is impacted based on demand. So that's one element of it. And then the second element is you're telling them about the problem you're trying to solve. So by allowing them to express themselves in a sense, to share a different approach, which may be different than how you're defining it or what you're asking for as part of the proposal, but allows them to maybe look at the same problem in a different way, because ultimately it's about trying to solve the problem, not about adhering to your specific way of how to solve that problem.
Right. I think it's very informative what you and the slide that you shared. We went into the purchasing chessboard as well. There is a link there if anybody wants to read about purchasing chessboard. I think the main message that comes out of that, and one of the important one is that RFP is one of the tools that I think the other one is that the questions that we have so many repeated questions, and we have so much of information just for the fear of missing something there, right? That we put a lot of excessive workload there. And as I said, if you talk to somebody from the bidding team, the people who actually fill out these questions and all, they are not very happy with procurement most of the time, because they have to answer a lot of questions, and they don't like it that much. But yeah, interesting. I hope that we get to a point where we are improving things. I think this is one of the starting point. I have a comment there from Christina. She says, asking all the questions and being diligent throughout the process, avoid waste. So that is the mindset that we start with. That is a fair point as well. You want to add anything about RFP or anything that we are discussing?
Yeah, first is Christina's point, right? Asking all the questions. There's something in Lean we call question to the void. So the who, what, when, where, and why, and the how. So the 5 W's and the 1 H. But really questioning, okay, have we addressed each one of those areas? And by doing that, you avoid the waste as well, right? So that's one thing from Christina's point.
And just to follow up on that slide, you have a company which is called Leanergize. Would you like to please talk about that?
Yeah, so my company's name is Leanergize, right? So that is a kind of a part-time thing because my objective is always to pay it forward. So doing these types of things, hopefully it's allowing people to have different perspectives. But my company, Leanergize, is about embracing lean with an energy and a mindset to become optimized. That's what Leanergize means. And what I'm trying to do with my company is I know that some of these principles, people have tried it over and over again, and they just haven't been able to eliminate the waste. So maybe there's an opportunity there to help operationalize it that I can help with on that element. So what I want to do with my company is basically provide the crawl, walk, run. So what does it look like if you're just starting off? What does it look like if you're in the middle of your approach towards doing it? Or what does it look like from a best practice perspective on whatever problem that someone has? Spend maybe 10, 15 minutes going through that crawl, walk, run as part of that problem. Free, this is paying it forward, right? And then they can then, if they align, then tell me where the maturity is of where they're at, and they can go back and try to solve it. In many cases, they probably have not been able to solve it, and if they haven't, then at that point, they could potentially hire me to help solve it, to go to the next level on that. If they're in a crawl, to go to a walk. Because I believe that's a way that I can also help to elevate wherever those problems may be. There's always a perspective I have from a crawl, walk, run, given my years of experience in all the different areas that I've been involved in to help different companies along the way. So I appreciate you just letting me share a little bit about my company.
No problem. You share a lot about RFPs and how lean can improve those areas. About your experience, I wanted to check with you on negotiation. One of the things that I even put in the banner was that you have negotiated for 18 countries. So first, a little bit of negotiation. What would you say to somebody who is starting negotiation? How can they improve their negotiation skills?
Yeah, I am an absolutely brainwashed by Keras negotiations. I have taken Keras multiple times. I've influenced over 500 people in my career to take Keras as well. If you're not familiar with Keras talks about the psychology of negotiations because it really is psychological. So it's all about aspirations. And in order to understand aspirations of the other party, that party has a blue sheet. You have a pink sheet. You want to understand what are the satisfiers that they have, but at the same time, lower their aspirations, but still achieve satisfaction. That's the key to negotiation, right? Is where both parties can be satisfied ultimately. And what you need to do is truly understand what are the pressures that they're under to sell. You're under pressure to buy, but they're under pressure to sell as well. So that's the advice I would give around negotiations is understand the other party's aspirations and what their satisfiers are.
Right. And when we're talking about 18 countries or multiple countries that you have done this thing, do you see any difference in country-wise? I mean, aspirations are universal, I think, but let's say, do you see any difference in the negotiation style?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And part of this has to do with this is how they've always done it. So they continue to do it in the same way. Like, for example, in Japan, you're probably not negotiating right in front of the decision maker.
Right. Yes.
You're going to have to go to, and sometimes that decision maker is in the room right there too. But they're not the ones that are talking directly with you.
Right.
So there is this hierarchy that you have to go through. And you have to allow them to save face, especially if that decision maker is in the room. So you have to be delicate in how you go about in that communication, because saving face is so important in certain cultures, and really in all cultures to a certain extent, but it's how you go about doing it in those different cultures that's important too.
Yeah. Some are more defensive. They take, you know, a reduction in cost as offensive even at times. I think Japan is one classical example. They don't like to talk about price in that way. You know, that, you know, if I reduce it, then did I put a markup in the first place, like that? So fair point.
But I would
Also,
say,
yeah,
oh, just
yeah,
one point on that, Ro, because
mhm,
that's a tactic as well.
right,
And you know, and how they're approaching you. So that shouldn't prevent you from truly getting down to the what you're trying to understand from a cost structure perspective, or just to be able to gain more intelligence so that you can be able to potentially further lower their aspirations in that conversation too, right?
right.
But how you go about it is the key, and the tack that you use to do it in a way where they still can save face in their organization in front of their leadership.
Yes, of course, because ultimately they will also have to stand before the leadership at one time, and you know, a lot of these things will depend their appraisal or performance review as well. So
Absolutely.
that thing plays in the head as well. Uh,
Yes.
one more thing. I actually delayed this question, but uh, we're going big on AI. AI is going to change procurement for sure. What are the immediate changes, or how do you see AI changing procurement?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a crawl, walk, run component to that. You know, the crawl component is a low-hanging fruits. It's repetitive work where there's a high level of predictability. It has to be over 99% of predictability and the outcome based on the data that's available that a human, and if you have agentic AI, for example, making decisions, that it's going to be consistently the same answer. If that's the case, fine. But how many areas in procurement does that truly take place where it's that level of accuracy? There's always nuances. And the thing that we all have to be, I guess, cognizant of is that every one of us has inherent bias that is a part of the sum of our life experiences,
Right,
whatever those are. And there's some element of bias that exists with that. And so in an AI engine, it's data clusters, it's the test data, and it's the relationship of those data clusters. And if each data cluster is each one of us with our own biases, you've just enabled a hyper bias in the AI engine and its output.
I like that word, hyper bias. Right,
So you got to be careful with that, and how it would potentially translate that. And in most cases, I think it's a recommendation engine today, because there are hallucinations. We have to understand that. And how do you minimize those hallucinations that take place by those AI engines? But if we can get over that in some way, and it will happen. Today is the worst day, you know, that will exist for that AI and its algorithm. Tomorrow will be better. The next day will be better. Years down will be even better. So it will minimize the variability of that hyper bias because it will understand itself of the biases that exist out there, and then where is the true, I guess, predictable outcome based on the majority of what they believe. I mean, that happens today. You know, I mean, in Google, if everybody said the sky is purple, if you asked
right,
Google, what is the color of the sky? If more than 50% said it's purple, it's going to say it's purple. It's not going to say it's
right.
blue. It doesn't have enough logic to know that. It's using the test data out there. So I just ask to be cautious as we kind of leverage AI, but at the same time, absolutely use it as a tool. There are not there's not a day that I don't use Copilot 5 or 6 times a day. Asking it questions, understanding, maybe probing it even deeper. I'll have it analyze spreadsheets or analyze proposals, even RFP proposals. Prompting is something we can all get better at, because when we become better at prompting the AI tool, now we're eliminating waste too, because we're not having to go like, oh, that's not what I wanted. Let me try this way now to prompt it.
Right. And these biases are there in negotiation as well. When we negotiate, one of the major things in negotiation is anchoring. Anchoring is actually a bias in that way.
Yes. Yes.
So these are common things. Yes. One more question on the career for procurement. So if a fresher is listening to this, or somebody who is just starting his career, what kind of advice would you say about procurement, and how can they succeed in this career?
Follow the data. So
Right.
when you follow the data, you will build a level of credibility and trust, because the data is the data. And if the data is bad data, you need to understand why it's bad, right? So if you're able to do that, now you can drive a level of influence. And influence is very important, both with our suppliers and with the business. Because when our suppliers understand that the business relies on procurement's guidance on what they buy from a goods or services standpoint, that enables that seller to really ensure that they're listening to you and are using your feedback and guidance to provide the best value proposition. So those are the two things that I would say. Follow the data, and then from that data, be able to be a good influencer.
Right. We are almost on time. If you allow me, I'll ask one more question, because I kind of like what discussion we had so far. One of the problems that we have today is that procurement is still under that wrap of transactional aspect that we have. We are not selling our values that much. How do you think that procurement can become more strategic as a partner to the stakeholders or customer that we have?
Yeah,
What
I think
can
there's a
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, there's a progression component there, right? The end element of that, from my perspective, I'd say where we've actually have a seat at the table, we're being a strategic enabler, is where we're able to fill unmet needs, where we're actually helping the business understand, based on your strategic objectives, because we understand what those are. Have you thought about this? This is what this supplier can bring to you, right? But at the beginning component of that is listening to our customers. If we listen to them, understand what their need is, become a subject matter expert in terms of what the supplier can bring, then you will elevate what your importance is in the organization, and you will be able to drive that influence. And then that builds momentum, because now when you've been able to do that, then now hopefully you're also having a better idea of the data. And if the data is good, then the data can tell a story. And you're able to be a good storyteller. And you're a good storyteller, now you're getting C-suite attention around better, faster, cheaper, and how you can drive that. And that's, I think, how you can enable us for procurement to be really kind of acknowledged as the strategic enabler.
Right. And to that point, Harold just commented there, data is equal to information is equal to intelligence. So I think and that also connects back to where we started off, that problem solving. What is it that you are actually solving?
That's right.
I think we, on that note, Pratik, thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Always I gain a lot of knowledge. I hope that the audience also gained a lot of knowledge. We covered a lot of topics. In detail, we covered the RFP process and lean, how it can better it. But we covered a lot of other topics as well. Any final thoughts or anything that you would like to add?
First off, just thanks for this opportunity. Hopefully we're able to inspire people. I really appreciate this forum that you've enabled. so that hopefully there's a level of thought leadership that comes out of this forum that helps people in their careers, which in turn then helps elevate our profession. Let's just make sure we all take an opportunity to pay it forward when we can, because this is a profession we all love, and we want to see this profession continue to mature and be the strategic enabler it can be.
Right. Thank you so much, Pratik, again. Always a pleasure talking to you. Have a nice day then.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
so much. Take care. Bye.
Thank you all. Have a
Bye,
nice
everyone.
day.
Yep, bye.
If you like this video, please like and subscribe to the channel.